So I think that often people think in regards to what is it that makes me angry instead of how is it that I create anger inside of myself. So that's one of the main things that we talk about in my workshops and my classes, particularly in my Aikido classes, how it is you make yourself angry. And basically the way to do that is to tense your muscles ever so much, restrict your breathing, and think with a really fast-paced internal dialogue. So we help people to notice what's the recipe they use to create anger. And then we help them to create and utilize new recipes. So we like to explore, as I'm saying, how is it that we make up this recipe called anger? How can we do something rather different? And one of the questions we ask is, what would you be feeling if you weren't feeling anger? So to me, anger has something to do, in some aspect people are thinking about, I'd like to get even, I'd like to kick that guy's ass, I'd like to mete out some punishment. And you only really have that concept at all if you think you can do that without getting your ass kicked in return. So if you weren't angry, how would you be dealing with the situation at hand? So one of the things we're thinking about is, what would you like to do physically to a person that you're angry with? Show me. Okay. As one possibility. Again. Another possibility. Again. Third possibility. Okay, so let's go back to the first one. Right. Okay. And then we ask, and what is it that you want to do from there? Perhaps. And from there, perhaps. Right? And even if I got to the point where I was on the floor, what would you want to do then? Would you want to kick? Would you want to... So, would your ultimate goal would be what? To injure you. To injure me. To somehow get even.
Yes. Revenge.
Revenge. So that's revenge is okay if he has the ability to do that, and I have no way really of protecting myself. What normally happens though is that the person, in this case me for instance, that's made this person angry is quite often bigger or more powerful. Whether physically more powerful, financially more powerful, or somehow just in a position that they're more powerful. So doing this doesn't really work, right? Because either what's going to happen is you get taken in a way that's dangerous, so you actually create further damage to yourself by trying to attack, or because of my financial power or whatever, get thwarted immediately. So attacking usually isn't a strategy that works so well. So what we try to do, for instance, in an Aikido kind of idea is we say, for instance, this is the punching hand, this is the pulling hand. I would say, no! Or I could say, yes! No! Yes! No! Yes! So you get a sense of empowerment without the feeling of needing to really somehow damage the other person. So you'll try the same thing somehow, not having done this before, but do your best. No! Yes! No! Yes! So we're doing yes and no at the same time. Sometimes we do this with something like more, less. はい、わかりました。More, less. So many different themes depending on what the person has going on inside. So I often use rubber physiotherapy balls with my work. And it's an important physical metaphor. Physical balance making for emotional balance. I'm adjusting my uniform here so I'll be able to do a few things. So physical balance helping to create emotional balance. Anger being an emotional imbalance. So for instance, we try sitting like this. It might take me a couple of goes to get up. Sitting on the ball. And off once. That's actually a pretty good beginning, believe it or not. So this is an exercise actually that we'd be teaching the students, and you can guess that they'd be falling all over the place. And you can see I'm having difficulty staying up myself. I'm on a ball, so I'm having to do a lot of adjusting. I'm not at all sitting on a chair. Okay, so now I'll try to just extend the range of what I'm capable of here. So you'll see more movement. I'll need my hand on the ball to adjust. Brought my feet down, but I'm still not touching the floor. Coming here, playing around. So, using a ball again as a physical metaphor to show emotional balance, and you'll find that the two work well together, or they actually fight against each other. When you're emotionally imbalanced, your weight literally tends to come up more into your upper body, usually into your shoulders, your head, your face. And that creates less physical balance. Your physical balance is meant to be here around the area of your navel. So a fair amount of the work that we're doing in this kind of discipline, the discipline of Seishindo, is through physical exercises helping people to achieve emotional balance. Anger being a case of emotional imbalance. So one of the ideas that you saw me do with Tony was this idea of push-pull, stop-start, yes, no, more, less. So what we believe in Seishindo is that anger is just one segment of an emotional cycle. Anger is just one segment of an emotional cycle. So what that means is anger in itself will never come to a place of completion for the person. So anger, 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 but it needs to turn into another emotion before the person has the possibility of living a happy life. So if we only continually perform one segment of an complete emotional cycle, we tend to wear ourselves out. Kind of like, almost like carpal tunnel syndrome from using just one part of the body, like typing all the time and the wrists get worn out. So that we wear ourselves out emotionally by only doing one segment of the entire emotional cycle. So for instance, if somebody dies, if a friend of yours dies, you have sadness, and then maybe even a deeper mourning or longing, and hopefully at some point
of a sense of celebration or something very beautiful about the fact that the person was someone that you really love. So you need to go through that whole cycle before you'll be able to really feel good again from your friend dying and get on with your life. Anger is very much the same way. That we have anger, and it's only half or a third or perhaps even a quarter of an entire emotional cycle. So we start creating bigger cycles by adding in yes and no's, stops and starts, more and less. And by adding to the cycle, there starts to be more movement of the emotional self along with more movement of the physical self. So when someone's angry, let's say I'm angry at my father for his treatment of me as a child. What I really want to have is a loving relationship with my father, with my parents. So anger will only be that one segment, and I'll stay stuck in an emotional, unhappy place as long as I'm stuck with only having the anger. What I want to have long term is a sense of being loved and appreciated. So we work physically through adding to the emotions, by adding to the physical range of what we're capable of doing. And yes and no, or one of the other things we do is, like I was doing some with Tony, what's the feeling you have when you're angry? Maybe it's grabbing, right? But that grabbing, again, is only one segment of the physical cycle. So physical cycles, emotional cycles, and eventually, often, from that grabbing, we might want to go into hugging. Or from the grabbing, we might want to go into a shaking of a hand or something else, but this is only one part of a cycle. This is only one part of a cycle. This is only one part of a cycle. Where does it need to go to come to a place of completion? And the sense is that it's a spiral, up or down. And so we get the physical body spiraling and moving, and we find that the emotional body, the emotional self, spirals and moves as well. So that's one of the important concepts that we have in general in Seishindo, and in particular for anger management. Another important point that we believe in Seishindo is that a person who is angry has a undue focus on a person or situation. Let's say I'm angry at my wife. And in the process of being angry, we create tunnel vision. Okay, foveal vision. And foveal vision, as we know from hypnosis and other wellness techniques, foveal vision tends to take away from a sense of relaxation. And foveal vision actually makes us less aware of the world around us. So anger is actually causes us to lose our greater sense of protection in the world, our greater sense of being protected, which will often tend to lead to other angry situations. So we focus on the object of our anger, and we lose touch with those around us. So often people that are really angry don't do well in social situations because they miss the social cues of others. So what we want to do is expand our consciousness, breathe deeply, feel ourselves kind of dropping into our center, and noticing that the anger turns into another emotion. We start to work on another part of the emotional cycle. So, again, wanting to say that with anger, we tend to shut down our awareness, shut down our visual field very much, tense the muscles, lose touch with the rest of our outside surroundings, tends to make us more likely to get hurt or injured in the future, tends to make us lose our social cues, the nonverbal social interactions that are so important to having harmonious relationships, and thus we tend to set ourselves up for future bad relationships. Another important point is what we call in Seishindo energetic signatures or energetic handshakes. So what happens is, particularly growing up as children, we need the emotional support and actually the emotional completion of another nervous system. So we have an individual child, and that child's nervous system is very far from being complete when the child is first born, and actually for a number of years. And the child needs the nervous system of the mother or primary caretaker to inform its nervous system as to how to continue to develop. So when we have the child, if we have an angry parent, the child and the parent, they create a kind of handshake, and the child needs eventually an angry person to handshake with or to help them to feel complete. And that's why people wind up, what's one of the major reasons why people wind up in relationships over and over again with the same kind of person. So it's very well known that women who, for instance, are physically abused by their first husband, if they get divorced or separated, tend to find another man that will be physically abusive, because somehow they learn from childhood that the only energetic signature or handshake that helps them to feel complete is a violent one. So that what happens is, if I'm violent, for instance, it'll be very easy for me to, number one, find someone else that actually, in some unbalanced way, requires violence to feel complete. So there'll be that kind of magnetic attraction. Or I will tend to draw other angry people, and that handshake doesn't work and creates a kind of explosion. The explosion is the fighting. A further concept is the idea that muscles that are holding on, which is what we invariably tend to do when we're angry, everyone universally, there's excess muscle tension. The excess muscle tension creates a constriction in the blood vessels and a constriction in the breathing process. This kind of feeling. So that anger, indeed, over the long term, will tend to lead to bad health. And there's just the concept, there's many stories in Oriental proverbs about, I couldn't grab a hold of happiness because I was already holding on to something else. So it's not until we let go that we can take in a new experience. So the holding of the muscles and the constriction of the blood flow and the oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange in the body will lead to poor health, and that's what winds up happening with anger. So that when we hold on to anger long term, instead of actually punishing the person that we're upset with, we actually wind up punishing ourselves. Very important concept. Instead of punishing the person we're hoping to punish, we wind up punishing ourselves by depleting our health and sense of well-being. As a last piece, I'd like to take you through an exercise that we often do with our students. And if you'd like to, you could take part in this exercise yourself right now. You can just listen in your normal state, or you can actually sit down in a chair that's comfortable, take a couple of deep breaths, and here we go. In talking about anger and wanting to have a more pleasing emotion in life, the first thing we want to do is take a deep breath. one more deep breath, at least. And notice 3 things that you can notice visually. I'm looking at the camera. You'll be looking at some kind of video screen. You'll be seeing me. You'll be seeing the wall behind me, off-white color, the greenish color of the couch. And then you take a deep breath. And the next suggestion is to hear 3 sounds around you. One, of course, can be the sound of my voice. And 2 other sounds in the local environment that you're in right now. Perhaps traffic noise, perhaps an air conditioner sound, perhaps sounds of movement in the room. A total of 3 sounds that you hear. And then you take a deep breath. The next suggestion is to notice 3 sensations on or inside your body. You might be able to feel your heart beating. You might be able to feel your tongue inside your mouth, your clothing on your body, your breathing. Whatever it is, feel 3 different things on the surface or inside your body. And when you've done that, you take another deep breath. And then we cycle through and we notice 2 further visual stimuli this time. Might be the color of my shirt as you're looking at me. Might be some feature of my face as you're looking at me. The color of my arms. The shape of my body. Whatever it is. 2 visual aspects of your environment. And when you've noticed those 2 aspects, you take a deep breath. Two further auditory aspects. Another sound. A continuation of the same sound. Or something about the tonal differences of the sound, perhaps of my voice. Going lower or higher, and then take a deep breath. And 2 things that you're able to feel on the surface of or inside your body. I can feel the temperature in the room. I can feel my left foot on the floor and my right foot on the couch, and you can feel something for yourself. And take a deep breath. And if you've been following along at all at this point, I'm guessing that the overall emotional state you're feeling now is very different from a state of anger. Another deep breath. The state that you're feeling now is most likely rather different than a state of anger. And the eventual questions that we begin to ask is, what would you need to do? What specifically would you need to do to go from this state into a state of anger? So this is an exercise that we often do in our workshops.